All right, welcome to the first Sarah Scoop Book Club. Yay!
Woo!
Um, this month we are reading the cast. Oh, that's backwards. The cast by Amy Blumenfeld, who is actually with us here today. Thank you for being here, Amy.
Thank you for having
Also
Very
with
honored.
us,
Very
also with us is Sarah of Sarah Scoop herself, and then we also have one of our contributors, Noemi. And then I am the books editor at Sarah Scoop. My name is Veronica. If you have not read the cast yet, I suggest you go and read it because there are going to be some spoilers. However, if you're like me and you're kind of okay with some spoilers, keep watching and then buy the book afterwards. Either way works for us. Just be warned that you're going to know the ending probably. Um,
So I would go read it. I don't like the spoilers, so I'd have to go read it first. Read it before you watch it so you don't get mad at us.
All right, so we all know the gist of this novel. It's about a bunch of ninth graders who, hi, my dog is here. A bunch of ninth graders who strengthen their relationship like into adulthood after one of their friends, Becca, gets sick. I think we're just going to start off with a few questions, and we really like to know your insight a lot of the time, Amy, but also just what us three, the readers, thought of this. So to start us off, I was going to start with a question. Um, so I think the biggest thing that I liked about this novel was the multi-perspectiveness of it, because you get to understand like what each person is actually thinking. However, I feel like sometimes like it's interesting to know what someone else is thinking after if you're like reading through Holly, for example, and then you keep going and you learn that someone thinks this about Holly. It's just very interesting. I don't know. What do you guys think about the multi-perspective?
I like it. I think as an author, though, I would like, how do you do it? I would be like, how do you keep them all separate in their own personalities?
With all different type of voice too.
Yes.
It was actually easier for me to do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like getting into character. If you've ever been in a play, it's sort of, you take on that persona. And so I wanted to sort of explore all of these issues that were, not, hold on, I'm sorry.
You're okay.
There's something in my throat. I wanted to explore all of these issues that were like not black and white, things that were very gray. And
Right.
in order to do that, I had to think like a lawyer, and I come from a family of lawyers. And so I basically took a legal pad and I drew a line down the middle, and I had like the prosecution and the defense. So I had all of these different topics. So you had somebody like Lex in a passionless marriage, and does she stay for the sake of her kids, or does she go and follow her passion and her bliss?
Right.
You have somebody like Holly, who and Adam, who have this loving, wonderful marriage, but they're in a different place religiously. And does she stay the course to honor him, or does she sort of listen to her gut and and follow that route and say, all right, I want to ease it up a little bit and not be as observant as I always have.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have somebody like Becca and Nolan, who are in this marriage where there's a lot of respect and a lot of love. But what do you do when you fundamentally disagree with somebody over something important, like a medical decision that needs to be made in a very split second? And so, not a split second, but in a short period of time.
Right.
And, what do you do? And so like I said, I thought like a lawyer. And so I said, okay, if I'm taking this perspective, what will be my arguments? And why would that character think that way? And so in shaping that argument, I was like, all right, well, what is it about that character's history and their background that would make them take that position? And that sort of like helped flesh out the characters also. And so and I also like as a reader and a writer, I always find it more interesting and it grabs you when you're reading these first person perspectives.
Right.
Any first person I'm like instantly drawn into. And so for me to sort of like put on that like helmet of that character and get into their mind was easier for me to write that way. And I could also sort of see things from their vantage point because none of this was like a black and white issue. It was all gray. And so I could say, all right, I could see why they would say this, and I could see why that person would think this way.
Mm-hmm.
That's how that all came to be.
Was that your initial decision though when you first started writing it? Were you like, was this automatically going to be multi-perspective, or was it more just it kind of evolved that way naturally?
It sort of evolved that way. Wasn't on a mission to do it. I knew that I had many characters, but it just naturally flowed. You know, I instantly, when I started from the different perspectives, I was like, it's flowing out of me if I write it this way, as if I'm that character. And so I just went with it.
Very cool. Do either of you two have a question you would like to ask the group?
I do. So
Yeah.
in one of the first sorry, chapters, and I really love it. It's when Becca sends a text to Jordana, say, "Hey, I cannot come. I'm gonna be there later." And after Jordana starts to pray and say a sentence that her dad used to tuck her in with bed bugs and to beat the bed bugs. I love it. I just love it so much. It was so good. And I was like, how do you come up with that? Was that maybe something that your parents like used to tell you? Because I was like, oh my gosh, that's
No, these are things that you pick up along the way, things you've heard other people say, and I don't know, just things I've made up. So
okay. I was like, thought it was.
I mean, some parts of the book are things that that were lifted, but not everything. That part wasn't.
Yeah, I know. One of the best things in the book. I don't know. I was just like, it was so cute and since I don't know, maybe I read too much into it. It was like, okay, basically, I thought, okay, to become like an independent female, because he said if somebody hurts her, to basically kick their butts. So that's how I interpret it. How to be like, hey, you are a strong woman. So since like a young age, she had to start to learn how to be strong. And so that's how I interpret, and that's why I love it so much.
Oh.
So that's why I was wondering, oh, maybe that's what your parents used to tell you. So like, what?
No, sorry.
I think it's really great that it shows it like a first person narrative like that, how it can affect like a reader, and you don't even realize that like the words you're writing can affect someone in such a strong way that like just some little snippet can actually affect someone. I think first person does that a lot, because when you're reading something in third person, it's a little bit more distance.
Yeah.
First person, I feel like you automatically connect more to it, and with this multi-perspectiveness, that first person I feel like is really strong, because you get to know everyone in a specific way that even the people around them don't really know.
And it was easier for me to even get to know my characters doing it that way. You know, because I'm writing it, as I said, from like inside their head. These became like my imaginary friends as well.
There was a lot of strong characters in the book. Do you have one that was your favorite?
It's like, how did you pick among your children? You know?
I know, that's what they always say, but I feel like there's got to be one you like relate the most
like
to.
Favorite.
I really liked Holly.
I like Holly too. That was so
good. And I like Seth a lot too. But I think Holly was probably my favorite.
Yeah, I think so. She was mine.
Yeah, she was mine too. I don't know why. I also feel like just being pregnant too, it just adds a little bit more of that extraness. I feel like the emotion I felt like was more with her, like the indecisiveness I connected with too that she had sometimes, and it's just a lot of the Holliness I connected with for sure.
I didn't set out to make her my favorite. She just, sometimes it just evolves, and I would, I sort of had, when I started out the book, I had a blueprint first, how it was going to kind of map out. And then you get into each chapter, and I would have my goals for each chapter, and I'd have like point A, point B, point C. I'd start out at point A, and I would make it to point C, but like sort of veer off along the way. And that would happen when I got into the dialogue. And so the dialogue, I would write something, I'd say, well, that person wouldn't really say that. And then it would change the whole thing, and it would get this very circuitous route to get to the point. I'd get there, but not in the way I'd mapped it out. And so I never intended for Holly to be my favorite, or for it, the characters sort of like come out of the page.
That's so cool to hear, because like I know we're discussing the book, but it's incredible, like the thought and the mindset that you put into it, like that people don't think about. They probably think, oh, she came up with these few characters, wrote it up, and then whatever. Where it all like changes as you're writing it.
Totally changes. And I mean, the very first thing I did when I came up with a concept for this novel was like, I wrote out the characters. I just sat down on my laptop and I wrote out pages and pages of descriptions for these characters. And like, I just had, it just like poured out. It was in me somewhere. I didn't know it, but it just sort of poured out. And from those character descriptions, I was able to sort of plot out what the story was basically going to be about. And then it, took on a life of its own.
Yeah, and I think I forgot to mention at the beginning of this that we actually interviewed you for our site a few months back. And correct me if I'm wrong, the premise is inspired by something that actually happened to you, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us just a little bit about that?
Sure. So when I was a kid, I had Hodgkin's disease, like Becca, and I didn't have a group of friends like Becca has in this book. I didn't have that. But my parents,
who have that?
Yeah, I mean, I had friends, but like a core group that I grew up with. But my parents, we belonged to the synagogue in Queens where I grew up, and my parents' friends, there were about 10 families, about 40 people, and their kids, who I was friendly with, made this videotape because I was obsessed with Saturday Night Live at the time. And they made an Amy Night Live videotape. And it was one of the greatest gifts I've ever received. And so when I was in the hospital, they produced this 90-minute, actually it was almost like 2 hours, videotape of skits of like complete ridiculousness and gave that to me. And so I thought, when I wanted to write a book that was not a memoir, but was going to be like a fun, like beach read, book club fiction, but thought-provoking and smart read about friendship and the long-term effects of surviving childhood cancer or any childhood traumatic event, and the impact not just on the patient, but on the loved ones, on the survivors' friends and family and future spouse and children and all of that. I thought back to that videotape that was made for me. And I was like, this is the perfect springboard for this type of book. So if I have these great characters that are relatable, that are like my friends and I, and they discuss the topics that we talk about, why not use that bonding experience for them in childhood? Having seen a friend go through this, why not making that video their bonding experience? And so I took that video from my childhood and made that the inspiration for the video that the cast makes. And then when I was in graduate school, I wrote my master's project in journalism school about adult survivors of childhood cancer. And they tell you at the beginning of the year in journalism school, pick a topic. You're going to be writing like a magazine type of article. Pick a topic that's going to keep your interest going throughout the course of the year. And I had no idea what I wanted to write. And so, of course, I left it to the day before the deadline. And I still had no idea what I wanted to write. And it happened to be my annual checkup at Sloan Kettering here in New York. And I was sitting in the waiting room, and I was with my little reporter's notebook, jotting on different ideas while I'm in the waiting room. And this woman to my right taps me on the shoulder, and she's like, "Are you waiting for somebody?" And she's trying to make conversation. And I was like, "No, actually." And I pull up my sleeve and I show her this like ID tag that's on my wrist. And she's like, "You're the patient?" And I started a conversation with her, and her daughter was there. Her 15-year-old daughter was sitting next to her, and she was very nervous, and the mother was very nervous, and they started asking me questions about my experience. And after my appointment, I went back and I hung out with them the rest of that afternoon, and I answered their questions about survivorship and being a patient. And the girl was about my age, when I was sick. And I walked back to my apartment. I'm like, all right, I have my topic. And so I spent the next few months just interviewing people, doctors, psychologists, patients, survivors, their loved ones, about the long-term effects, the emotional and physical long-term effects of surviving childhood cancer, and how treatment really doesn't end and the experience doesn't end the day you walk out the hospital doors. And so I knew, so at graduation, my professor came up to me and he's like, you should consider turning this into a book. And I had no idea I never thought about writing a book. And I figured he just meant some sort of compilation of interviews or something like that, and something nonfiction. And over the years, it just never went away. That seed was like planted in my brain, and I just never let go of it. And I didn't know what it was going to be. And it took, almost 20 years. But eventually, when I turned 40, I'm like, all right, I got to do something with this. And my friends and I were having these really interesting conversations about life and just like marriage and relationships and friendships and parenting and career and things we hope to accomplish. And I took those conversations, the videotape that I talked about, and these characters that I had just like created, and it all sort of like swirled together and became the cast.
That's really awesome.
That's so cool. It's really neat too to hear that it's inspired off of something so true to you.
I think the thing that you were talking about is like, one, we don't really talk about like adult survivors of childhood illnesses. But in the cast, there was like at the end when they were waiting for Adam's surgery, Becca automatically knew that something was wrong.
Yeah.
Even though the others didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that like, I feel like I would have not noticed. Like it felt so personal to her.
The pity. The pity.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, it's because she had gone through that. And I don't know, that was just one of the moments that stuck out to me. And I feel like it relates to everything you just said. It's like something you wouldn't think about, because when a kid is, sick and then they're cured, which I know they don't use that word cured automatically, but is cured, you don't really think about the future. It's always about what's going on in the present and then the end goal of not being sick anymore. Whereas Rebecca, it's like, that was always sticking with her regardless. Like she was always going to have some sort of perspective on that sort of thing.
Yep, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, can we talk about Adam? That was my biggest fear, is that my boyfriend's gonna die in like a car accident. So like, it's like one of those like weird things. Like I feel like the idea of death happening instantly is a lot scarier sometimes than death if like someone's been sick for a really long time. Was that your plan all along to do that, or was it more? No, it just kind of happened.
No. In fact, my very first draft of the book didn't have that at all.
Really?
No. And that was my idea for a second book, if I were to do a sequel, was to have that happen to Adam and then see what would happen with Holly's life.
Poor Adam. He was the goner all the time.
I know. I loved him. He's just like perfect. But I think part of the lesson in the book, or the purpose, is to just say, like, life is short. You never know what's going to come around the corner. And I've seen that happen many times in my life, where you just really, truly have to appreciate every day. I know it's cliche, but it's the truth. And so I think part of that message is you can be seen, it's also, I wanted to show the different impact that having, aside from Adam, but the different impact that seeing a friend suffer at a young age can have on different people. So you look at somebody like Seth, who was, a straight A student and got into Princeton and then screwed it up because he's like, why am I killing myself for this? Life is short. I'm just going to enjoy. And then you have somebody like Lex, who also was a phenomenal student and really smart, and was just like, you know what? I don't care. I don't care about the career. I feel like family is the most important thing, and I want to get married young, and I want to have kids, and I want the whole dream, and I want all that. And then you have somebody like Holly, who didn't necessarily set off to like push off having a child, but she was very career oriented and wanted this dream and went after it and was a huge success. And so people say, okay, life is short. I'm going to grab that brass ring. I want to make that dream happen. And so people have different reactions to seeing such a traumatic event at such an early age. And so I wanted to show that. And then I also wanted to show that, even with all of that, you can plan all you want. And sometimes things just sort of happen. And the impact in terms of religion also that would have on Holly. Yeah.
Also, too, I think the juxtaposition between what happened to Adam and then, Becca's illness when she was younger, it's just, life is short, and it can abruptly end out of nowhere. And I think that this book kind of reflects on like, okay, this is real life. Like, life actually is unexpected. People grow up, they evolutionize, and then sometimes things just end, and sometimes things are, go a different direction than you want it to go. And I think this book really focuses on a lot of, one, the evolution of people and friends as a group, but also two, like life itself.
And the challenges, and like you said, like things can just happen, but also all of these characters are going through different things, so you see different perspectives on life as well.
And they're there to support each other.
the most about this book was that everything is real. It's something that can happen to everybody. It's not just like those are like what the five of them and their like partner experience were it's something that everybody can experience. And as I say, when I started reading, I was like, oh no, Nolan is so cute. He's an awesome husband and everything. But it's true, in the moment of crisis, he wasn't able to handle it. Honestly, I really thought it was selfish because even though Becca knew what she wanted, she couldn't accept it for her. But to Adam was my favorite character, actually. I know, it was so sad.
So you were devastated, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, honestly, I was a little bit skeptical because religion is not a big part. I'm not religious.
Right.
I was raised Catholic, but my parents never pushed me or anything. So I was like, okay, those two people. So I'm just having my opinion. I'm not gonna try to be offensive or anything to somebody who's really religious or anything. But I saw a lot of people, like one of my some relative are really religious, are really Catholic religious, and I saw how that impacted their life, and how they drastically changed their lives because of religion.
Right.
Even though, in some aspect, it was in a negative way. They accepted, but from seeing, so I was a little bit worried, like how Holly and Adam relationship would develop, because I loved Adam, I loved Holly, and I loved how they have the religion and everything, that they were happy with it, and like everything was based on them. But I was worried because when Holly started to have a mindset like, and what if I want something different for my child? What if I want it to be more open-minded, more? I was like, please, Adam, please choose her and not. Yeah, choose religion, but like don't just choose religion, choose Holly. So like when he was like, okay, we can do it, we can decide it, it's not a problem. I was like, yes.
I think that goes back to the gray that you were talking about, Amy, about how like everything's not black and white, and this book revolves a lot around the gray, that like you don't have to just pick one thing or the other, and your life is going to go in different directions, and just because something isn't, what you thought doesn't mean it's automatically going to be the wrong decision. Mm-hmm. I think the book does focus a lot on the gray, and again, poor Adam, but that's just
it's what gives the book a little bit of a churn too, where you're like, does that really just happen?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so that's what happened. So I went through the first draft, and it was this like perfect happy ending, and my agent and the editors were like, it's good, but it's predictable, you know. And so what can you do to spice it up? And so I took the idea that I had for the next book, and I made that the ending of this one. And it actually, I think, made it stronger and more interesting, because, life doesn't tie up with a nice little red bow at the end, all the time.
Yeah.
So, it worked out. It worked out. But, it's what a lot of people talk about, too, is the part with Adam.
Well, as a reader, like, you hate for it to happen, but you're also like,
like
you just are really into, like it comes out of nowhere. Not really I don't know if that makes sense, but it definitely, like you said, it just gives it that little extra.
Little oomph. Yeah.
It's a little extra part of life, I feel like, that like it kind of, and the fact that, like you said, like it wasn't initially in your first draft was surprising, but it makes sense because you said that since it was a different idea for the next book, if you were going to write it, it just felt fluid. Like I wouldn't have known any different, because it felt like it was meant to be in that book.
Thanks. It also helped sort of tie up Jordana and Holly's relationship better than it had the other way. So it worked out. I'm glad it's in there.
Well, now in book 2, what are you gonna do to somebody else?
Don't you want to know? We'll see. I'm working on it. So. We'll keep you posted. It's going to be a little while, though. But, yeah, it's in the process.
So you mentioned Jordana and Holly's relationship. Was that kind of difficult to write, or was it more – because, like, they evolutionalized throughout – I keep using that word. But their relationship kind of goes through some ups and downs. Was that one of the things that was a little bit more difficult to maintain?
No, it wasn't difficult. I mean, I wanted to – when I was running – these chapters by my friends, they were the best, my little consulting crew. They really wanted like not a girl fight, but like a tension between friends, you know?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to get to that, you know, when you have three or whatever, like a group of girls, sometimes, you know, there's a little, you know, subtle, passive fighting for, well, she's my best friend. No, she's like my sister. You know, there's like a lot of that. And I wanted to play that up. And that happened to be the stuff that some of my friends were really interested in. So that's why I, you know, I wanted to pursue that relationship a little bit with the tension between them. And, you know, who knows Becca better? Who's closer to Becca? Who's really got her back? And, you know, and all of that. So I thought it added another layer, because you have the romantic relationships, you have the marriages, you have the adultery, you have, you know, all of that. But I wanted to have some of that, and you have the support too. But in coming with the support, sometimes there's a little bit of competition, there's a little bit of jealousy, and I wanted to sort of play that up.
The real life part.
It's the real life part, and that was, my friends were like, "Come on, that's like that happens." So I you know, just sort of magnified it.
Especially as you like grow older too. I mean, I moved away, so I never stuck with my friends from high school. Like that was just never my thing. So for me, it was really interesting to just read how like a group can kind of, again, evolve. I keep using that word, but I feel like that is a great word to describe it.
And grow and change.
And how, like, you know, one moment you can all be happy and one moment you can all just be kind of like at odds with each other. And I think what you did, Amy, is you did a really good job of like making it where it wasn't too much. Like they obviously don't hate each other. Like they're not like gonna scratch each other's eyeballs out and like, you know, cage match. But like it was very, like you said, it was kind of like that passive aggressive, like little subtle things that kind of trickled throughout throughout the novel that made you kind of realize that like, oh, okay, there is something a little bit more here that is kind of being shown to the reader, that like there's a little bit of that tension.
And there were some other points that I wanted to make too. Like I like the fact that Jordana was taking, not taking Nolan's side, but at least supporting him.
Yeah.
You know, because I wanted her to sort of take the position that I was the closest person to Becca, and I know what it's like to lose like someone who's like a sibling or a spouse or something like that. And so I wanted to play up that relationship. I wanted somebody to have his back. Again, not black and white. None of this book is saying, you know, this was the right choice for somebody who's choosing or not choosing reconstruction and mastectomy, any of that. There's no right or wrong. But I wanted to have Jordana sort of support him. I didn't want him flying solo in that. So that was another relationship that I thought was worthy of you know, some airtime.
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, sorry, hold on. There we go. All right. Do either of you two have any sort of favorite part or least favorite part you would like to discuss? Is that a hard question?
There are a lot of parts that I liked and loved. As I say, one of my favorites was like the sentence with the bed bugs. So that's my top one. I don't know why.
Which one?
I couldn't understand what you said either.
Oh, the one, my favorite part was with the sentence was the one with the bed bugs.
Yeah.
That's how I interpreted. So that's, I guess, why I'm so in love with that part. But I love the relationship that the five of them have, and I love how he says that. Okay, I just graduated college. I'm not even a year out of college, and I was like, okay. Some of them, they didn't even know what they wanted to do after. Like that took a long time to realize, okay, I want to become a therapist. I was like, okay. And so that makes me kind of feel better, because like I studied journalism too. I'm like, okay, I still have like time. It's not like I need to have everything set in stone right now. I can change. Something can change. Maybe tomorrow I'm gonna, I don't know, love business and want to become like a business manager or something else. So it's like, I can change. It's not forever. Like Alexa, she changed in a way. Okay, I want to do something on my own. So she opens her own business, and she realized I'm not in love. So I want to change. Like, and she make a decision that most people struggle with. I'm not in love with my partner anymore, but we have children. What should I do now? Should we stay just because the children are still little, even though they were high school, like, you know, or one was starting high school, or should I leave and try to find happiness in that kid's gonna be better? But I like how she shows to be herself, to make the decision to be, okay, I'm not in love anymore. Is it really the environment that wanna like let my kids grow? Because even if she decides to stay together, the closeness with her husband wasn't there anymore. And I also loved that when in the book you wrote, but she never spoke badly of her like children's father in public, because she still like, I don't want to say admired, but she's still respectful of him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they share 3 children together. So it's, I mean, I love how they took their own time to make their decision to find who they are, and how they don't change for other people, because if they change, that means how you say that Lex husband doesn't beat doesn't go like doesn't go like, what's the sentence, like the beat of her like his own drum, but he follows other people, while the main character
beat of their own drum.
Yes.
Yeah.
They stick to themselves. They stick to their individuality. They don't follow the flow. They don't decide to change just to like assimilate to society. So that's what I really like, and that's what like I say, okay, I need to be myself. I don't want to change because of somebody else. So that was one.
That was that was another one of my lessons in this. It was like, it's authenticity, the importance of authenticity and knowing who you are, and just, as you say, marching to the beat of your own drummer, and just staying true to who you are, whether it's the troubled marriage, or it's the religion, or it's a decision about your body, and with the person you love the most not really seeing eye to eye with you. You have to listen to your gut. Yeah. And that was part of, it's a struggle, but that was part of the black and white part of the book.
I think that goes back to how you wrote them all having like their own perspective too. It was just so much easier to relate, where I don't think that message on each of them individually would have gone through had it just been written from,
one of
Holly's perspective or Beck's or whoever. Like,
right.
So
I'm glad I came through.
Yeah.
So Sarah, do you have a favorite or least favorite part? By least favorite, I mean just something that, like maybe Adam's death, that was my least favorite part, but at the same time my favorite part because it did add that spice. Like, what was your...
I don't really think I had a least favorite part, but I think Adam's death in a weird way was my favorite too, because it just put everything into perspective just a little bit more.
Plus, if you add the baby in the mix for like little Ezra, that part I think like, too.
It's not also my favorite part for like real life, but like it is for like the story. It just, like everything isn't perfect.
One of the aspects we talked about is having the option to do what you want with your own body and making that your choice. Was that an intended part of the story, or was it more of just another natural thing that kind of evolved into it?
It was an intended part of the story, because there are a lot of, when you speak to the survivors of childhood cancer, and I'm sure of anything else too, there are a lot of physical long-term effects.
Right.
There are secondary cancers. There are other things that they deal with. And so I wanted to bring to light something that a bunch of people have talked about. And so when you, unfortunately, with the demographic of my readers, breast cancer is, it's so common. And so if I'm targeting women in their, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, unfortunately, somebody knows somebody who's had breast cancer.
Oh, yeah.
I could have picked thyroid cancer. I could have picked, some form of bone cancer. I could have picked breathing problems, pulmonary issues, heart, cardiovascular issues, chemotherapy, radiation. They can cause these long-term effects. I chose breast cancer because I felt that this was going to be something that women in my demographic of readers would be able to relate to, unfortunately. More so probably than childhood cancer, hopefully. And so I then figured that would be a really easy way to get a relationship, marriage tension going, to have that discussion. And so I wanted to shed light on a long-term effect. I wanted to shed light on the impact that could have on a marriage and on the friendships. And so that's how that came to be.
I think you are right. Like everyone knows someone with breast cancer, and that's a very unfortunate thing. But we don't talk about things you were saying, like the fact that there's secondary cancers, that there are other issues that can evolve. And I think also too, it changes mentality a little bit. Like deciding what you want to do with your body changes as certain other things happen to your body. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that book touched on it.
Particularly for people, for somebody like Becca or people in with that type of experience.
Yeah.
I get checked for millions of secondary things. Every year I go for tests.
Mm-hmm.
And so do bazillions of other, cancer survivors. But this is something that's on a lot of people's radar, and this is a common thing. And if you read about people who have breast cancer and who have reconstruction or mastectomies or choose to or not to reconstruct, most of the time they're like, oh, my spouse was so supportive and this was so wonderful. And they don't talk about the tensions behind. And so I interviewed some people who were like, it wasn't a cakewalk, and this was a hard choice. And, and I didn't want to, celebrity gossip magazine this and say everything is perfect. This is real life, and these are conversations that people have to deal with. It wasn't enough that they had all of this stuff in childhood or as a young adult, depending on their age. This is stuff that people deal with in terms of long-term effects. And also it's something that even if you didn't have a childhood experience, people are diagnosed at a young age with breast cancer, and they're dealing with these conversations. And so it can, if it's the first time diagnosis at age 40 or 45 or whatever, it's probably a different reaction and a different outcome than if you had it as a secondary cancer. Like if you had it as a child and then got diagnosed,
right.
You have a slightly altered perspective. But regardless, the conversations are still the same. It's my body. What do I want to do with it? And how is my partner or my spouse or whatever, going to feel if I choose this or choose that? How is my child going to feel later on? What kind of role model am I setting for them, about what it means to be a woman, and listening to your body and feeling comfortable in your own skin. And those are all things that I hoped got across in the book.
I think especially to the normalization of Becca, I think sometimes a lot of the times we view people who have been sick as just sick. Like it's sometimes society will just be like, deem them as, okay, this is their thing and it represents all who they are. And I feel like there were times where I just forgot that was part of her. Like she was just a human and she was just going through choices like any other human would go through. And again, I think the multi-perspective helped with that. I just saw her as a person. I'm not saying I don't see people who have gone through things as people, but sometimes we do tend to forget, like, oh, they have a life outside this. Oh, they do have relationships. Oh, they have these choices they have to make. Things aren't always going to be easy because things aren't easy for everyone. And I saw that throughout the novel. I kind of would, even during moments where they're discussing her stuff, like, I kind of forgot that, like, oh, yeah, like, she was once this person. But yeah. She's just a character, just another character. And I think it's just, I think that was actually my favorite parts when I think about it, just that she's real. And I think part of that is due to your experience too. Because I don't think anyone can just write like that.
I put in, that's why a lot of people say, like, what part is real? What part is not? How much of Becca is you? I drew upon my childhood experience for sure. A lot of it is made up. A lot of it is just, for the sake of.
It is fiction, yeah.
If I wanted to write a memoir, I would have written a memoir. Fortunately, not that riveting. So this is why I had to do the fiction version. But there were scenes, especially in the early part of the book, like in the hospital. A couple of them were taken from my own experience, and like the part with the Tylenol where the father gets really frustrated. That happened. It wasn't exactly like it happened in the book, but my dad got really frustrated one day when I couldn't swallow pills of, Tylenol, and I had all of this other stuff. And he's like, you've gone through all of this and you can't deal with it. Extra strength Tylenol. And I couldn't. And he was really frustrated. And, there was a time when my mom actually threw herself over me on the hospital bed and was like, don't do this, don't leave me. And so that was a real scene. Yeah. But the bulk of it is made up. But yes, when you see things from, the eyes of a child whose experience doesn't have to be cancer. It could be anything, any traumatic experience. It stays with you. It stays with you, and it shapes who you are. It doesn't define you. It doesn't shape all of who you are, but it definitely has an impact. And so I drew upon that when I was writing some of those parts of Becca.
Mm-hmm. You also, in the multiple perspective, it's not just females, there's males. For those of you who haven't read it, which you should have by now because there's been a lot of spoilers. Was it difficult to write in like the male perspective and then the female perspective?
It's totally fun. No, it was totally fun. I loved it. Because I have a bunch of guy friends and, my husband, and I just think about like, what would they say? Yeah. Like a lot of those guys, like, I don't know. I just got their voices in my head and I just, put it out there.
Like you said, imaginary friends, right? Just kind of hanging out and like,
yeah.
I love it. I think this is one of those books, like you should reread it like every year or so too. Oh. Yeah.
Thank you.
Why so, Sarah?
Just because it's things you don't always think about in your daily life. Everyone gets busy and you just are living life and you don't think about issues or problems that come up until they come up. And so I feel like it can just prepare you maybe and appreciate things.
Yeah, not only that, I feel like too, it puts you in the perspective of someone else. Because I feel like me and my partner were always just arguing. One thing we argued about was like cleaning, and I'm just like, it's not that hard. But if I was reading the book and read his chapter, like there would actually be all this like emotional issues about cleaning and how it takes up his time, and like this novel kind of shows you that like people see the world in different ways.
Yeah.
Not just based off of experiences, but based off of constant sort of ongoings when it comes to relationships. And I think this book also focuses on, what happens to friends when they grow older and how, their relationships kind of change too. I went into this novel expecting it to be about a girl who was sick. That's kind of what I expected. And I feel like I came out of it instead of like a book about friends. That's really what it is. Because like I said, I can't even remember sometimes. Hi, my dog is just kind of wants to be part of this book club. There you go. But yeah, I feel like this book is much more about relationships than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But
wow, good. That makes me happy.
We'll have to, when you get the next one out, we'll have to redo this. Just to get
oh yeah. All right. Do we have any final thoughts?
Can I go?
Yeah,
yes, you go. I feel like I'm good.
I need to say, I not usually this genre that I read, but honestly, I was in love. I was hooked since the first few chapters. I was like, what's going on? I really love it, how you develop the characters, and as Veronica was saying before, they made me see them as real people. You were able to turn them into like three-dimensional characters, and I was like, okay, I never thought about, or maybe, I heard something, but actually never really thought about what having cancer, meant for people around you. Like how they felt, how they help you, like how that changed them. And also like the long-term effects, that was like, okay, you are right. Like I never even thought about that, because when you think people, oh, she or he beat cancer, okay, you think they're okay, but they are not, because they can have a relapse, as Becca did, even though it was a different type that was caused by the medicine that she took to like eradicate the first type of cancer. It's stuff that's happened, and as I say, I love it so much because it's so real. It's real, and it teaches a lot about compromises, because as you said, it's not black and white. There are gray area.
Definitely gray.
Alan was an awesome guy in the first few chapters, but when he found out that Becca didn't want to have the plastic surgeon like reconstruct her breast, he changed it. He wasn't what I expected. And a lot of time, that's what you think. You have somebody on your corner cheering you, but when something happens, then they leave the corner. And like how have it changed? Also how you incorporate religion. I'm not a religious person, but I love it. One, because it was not Christianism. I don't have anything against it, but the majority of books, it's about Christianism, or like fall like under the umbrella of like Christianism. That after it's Catholic or another type, it's still that. So I love how you implement how those religion help those people, how it helps especially Ollie and Adam, but also how Jordana, she said that she didn't pray in years since she was little, but for her friend, she turned again to religion to help say, hey, please help her. And so I loved how they have a lot of stuff, things, what happened in real life that can happen to everybody. That's I guess that the main point is I love the book because it's real. That's it. That's what makes it so wonderful and so touching.
Thank you.
Good answer.
That's like
Good
the
answer.
best way to sum it up because it's real.
Yeah. All right, Sarah, if you had one word to describe this book, what would you describe it as?
I just said it because it's real.
Because it's real? You're still Noemi's?
I mean, that's what we've been saying this whole time. It's relatable.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone's like, puts things in perspective. Like it's making real life in a story.
Yeah. And I mean, I read a lot being the book's editor, and for some reason, like I said, I think I agree with Sarah. It is one of those books you need to read like once a year because of the whole perspective thing. Like not the fact that you wrote it in multi-perspective because, that happens a lot. It's the fact that I felt like I actually gained more from each character by being inside their head. Plus it's just a really good book. So do you have any final thoughts for us, Amy? You want to leave us with?
I'm so glad that it really resonated on so many levels. Sometimes when you write these things, you just don't know what's going to click with people and what's not. And I wrote it. It was a bucket list item. I needed to get this out. It was a passion project, and I'm so glad that it's just struck. It struck a chord with all of you in different ways. And you never, like I said, you never know what people are going to read into and take away from it. And I'm glad it's worked. So thank you.
Well,
thank you so much for being with us. Our book for February is Not Her Daughter by Rhea Frey. Make sure to buy, hold on, mine's frozen, so can you see? The Cast by Amy Blumenfeld. Anywhere books are sold, definitely on Amazon. And that's basically it for our first book club. How'd we do, guys? You think we did good?
Great.
Thank you.
I did good. Yeah. All right. Thank you all so much.
Thanks so much.